All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the first of two informational webinars on the Ocean Protection Council Once Through Cooling Interim Mitigation Program Award Guidelines. We are scheduled from 2 to 3 p.m. today. My name is Melissa Kent, and I am a project scientist at California Ocean Science Trust in Oakland, California. I'll be hosting this webinar on behalf of the Ocean Protection Council, and we'll be joined by Tova Handelman, Marine Protected Areas Program Director for the Ocean Protection Council, in just a moment. So the purpose of this webinar is to provide an overview of the award guidelines and to provide an opportunity for the public to ask questions and provide input. As I mentioned, this is the first of two scheduled public webinars. The second will be held on Thursday, August 30th, from 10 to 11 a.m. A couple of notes of housekeeping. This Zoom webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be archived on the OPC website. I think we have that in the back. And you'll see down here at the bottom the link to where that recording will be housed. Public participants are logged in a listen-only mode, and we will be saving questions until the end. As this is an informational webinar about the award guidelines, we will not be answering questions about specific project eligibility, but you have the opportunity to contact Tova directly about specific projects by email, and we will have her information available during her presentation. You can ask questions in one of two ways after Tova's presentation. You can either chat in your questions to us at any time during the webinar using the chat box, and we can pose those to the group. Or you can select the raise your hand, and we can call on you to speak. We will be able to unmute you, and you may need to unmute the line on your end as well. So to make sure you are connected to audio by pushing the icon at the lower left of the Zoom window. So without further ado, I'll turn the webinar over to Tova. Tova, take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. If you could advance, yeah, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. I'm Tova Handelman. I'm the Marine Protected Areas Program Manager at the Ocean Protection Council, and I'm very excited to speak with you all today about our Once Through Cooling Interim Mitigation Program, and also, of course, the award guidelines that are now available for public comment. Here's a brief outline of what we will be discussing today. I'll start off with a quick overview of what has occurred leading up to the creation of these award guidelines and what our competitive program is, and then we'll jump into what you will find in the award guidelines. And we'll have time for questions and discussion. Next slide, please. I'll assume that you're all familiar with what Once Through Cooling is and its impacts, so I won't get into that now, but I think it is worth reviewing how OPC has come to receive these funds to create this competitive award program. In 2010, the State Water Resources Control Board established a policy to address the damaging impacts of Once Through Cooling. And this policy requires power plants to stop using Once Through Cooling technology, and until they transition to less harmful cooling systems, they are required to make mitigation payments to the state of California. The payment amount is set by the State Water Board, and it's based on the power plant's annual intake volume of water until they come into compliance with the policy. Next slide, please. The policy gives a clear directive that $5.4 million of the payments received through the program will be allocated to the Ocean Protection Council annually, and it is to support projects that increase the marine life associated with the state's marine protected areas in the geographic region of the facility. We'll get into what this means in a moment, but just wanted to note that this amount was based on an interagency budget analysis, which was conducted by the MPA statewide leadership team, and it analyzed costs associated with the MPA management program that have a direct nexus with Once Through Cooling impacts. As you see here on the graphic, any remaining funds beyond the $5.4 million allocated to OPC will go to the California Coastal Conservancy, and that will focus on wetland restoration. As you all know, of course, wetlands are critical nursery habitats for a wide variety of species that are impacted by once-through cooling. Next slide. It's important to note that the funds will decrease as the power plants come into compliance with the policy, of course, but for the next 5 years or so, we anticipate that OPC will receive $5.4 million annually. Eventually we'll receive less, and just to let you all know, this competitive award program is it's expected to end in 2029 when all of the power plants are required to be in compliance. Let's get into OPC's program a little more here. You can advance to the next slide, please. So through discussions with the state water boards and the MPA statewide leadership team, as well as input from many stakeholders, and also with approval from our council, OPC has developed 4 program priorities that guide how the $5.4 million should be spent annually to achieve the goals of the policy to increase marine life in California's MPA network. So on the next slide, you'll see you'll see these program priorities, which are designed really in order for MPAs to accrue their maximum ecological benefit, including those that offset once-through cooling impacts. MPA regulations need to be enforced, and ocean users need to be educated about those regulations in order to improve their compliance. Also, funding research and monitoring projects will help us understand the level to which our MPA network may be offsetting once-through cooling impacts. And finally, the funds will be allocated to restoration projects to determine the level of additional mitigation needed to fully ameliorate the current levels of impacts. Next slide. So OPC can distribute its annual funds in 2 ways, through the competitive award program and also through interagency contracts or other unsolicited projects as needed. All projects, whether established through the competitive award program or otherwise, will be evaluated by the same criteria, and they will be subject to council review and approval. A minimum of a 10-day public comment period will be made available prior to the council meeting so the public can review the recommended projects. And I just wanted to highlight here that 3 projects have already been approved by the council, and those are with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Law Enforcement Division to increase enforcement efforts, the Department of Parks and Recreation to improve MPA outreach and education efforts in state parks co-located with MPAs, and with California Sea Grant to administer a competitive grant program for long-term MPA research and monitoring. Next slide. Here's an overview of the upcoming timeline for the competitive grant program. We'll get into this a little bit in more detail toward the end as well. As you all know, we are currently in the middle of a 30-day public comment period for the draft award guidelines, and that will close on September 14th. Just wanted to note here that your input on the award guidelines is a critical step in creating this program. We definitely want to understand your needs and hear your ideas, so I really appreciate the time that you're taking to provide your comments and to attend this webinar as well. Next, we will try to address your comments as best as we can to create the final award guidelines. And that final will be brought to the Ocean Protection Council for approval at the October 25th meeting in Santa Cruz. And then pending council approval, of course, we will release an open call for proposals on November 1st for our first round of the competitive awards program. This year, a little over $7.4 million will be available to fund the projects in the 4 categories I mentioned earlier. But moving forward, we'll have $5.4 million available. Next slide. So I won't go into all the eligibility criteria right now. You can review them in section 2.6 in the award guidelines, but I'll just give a quick overview. So all proposed projects must be consistent with the state water board's once-through cooling policy, and it must fall within one of the four, at least one of the four program priorities categories that I described earlier. The projects must clearly demonstrate how outcomes would increase marine life associated with MPAs in the geographic regions of the facilities, and they must be focused within the geographic region, and I'll get more into this more in just a moment. Projects must be ready to start work upon approval and should be completed within 1 to 3 years. The funds can be awarded to public agencies, including local, state, and federal, public or private universities, nonprofit organizations, private entities, federally recognized Indian tribes, and state Indian tribes listed on the Native American Heritage Commission's California Tribal Consultation List. Next slide. So let's get into what the geographic region of the facilities actually refers to. Ocean Science Trust convened a working group of the Ocean Protection Council's Science Advisory Team to scientifically define the spatial extent of once-through cooling impacts and to help understand what that geographic region of the facility is. The working group released their report in June, and you can find it on the program's webpage. The report determined that because oceanographic currents connect locations both inside and outside of MPAs, the harmful effects of once-through cooling extends hundreds of kilometers from a power plant's intake pipe. So that's 100 kilometers north and south of the power plant, and therefore the report defines the areas impacted as the entirety of state waters, which is 3 nautical miles from the coastline. And that's from San Diego to Big Sur near Lucia. And this includes the waters around the Channel Islands. So to be eligible to receive funding, projects must be focused within this region. If the project takes place outside of this region, like for a statewide application, for example, then the applicant must demonstrate how the projected outcomes are connected to the geographic region. And projects that are focused solely outside the geographic region of the facility are ineligible. I'd also like to note that the working group also created a scientific framework to evaluate whether or not a restoration method is likely to increase marine life associated with MPAs. The framework included 3 guiding principles, which are that the restoration method has a high likelihood of restoring the integrity of the coastal ecosystem, being successful at a scale that can provide meaningful ecological benefits, and being self-sustaining over a long period of time with minimal maintenance. So if you'd like to propose a restoration project, I strongly recommend that you review this report, as you'll need to demonstrate how your project addresses its recommendations. And again, you can find this report in both the award guidelines and on the Once Through Cooling program's webpage. Next slide. So the minimum award is $300,000, though OPC may award smaller projects as needed. Subawards are allowed, and it's highly recommended that applicants with projects under $300,000 collaborate with others to create a larger proposal and apply as a coalition with one defined administrative lead. And I strongly encourage that applicants discuss potential small projects with me in advance of submitting a proposal. We definitely want to hear what kind of projects are being proposed out there, and we don't want to, cut anybody out just because they're under $300,000. But because I am one person and can only manage so many grants, we strongly recommend to apply together. The maximum award is $5,400,000, though it is unlikely that a single award will receive all of the funds available in a given year because we really want to encourage a selection of diverse projects that address current needs. OPC will issue solicitations annually in the fall, and the solicitation will provide more details on the minimum and maximum award amounts available per program priorities. Next slide. So here's an overview of the application and selection process for this first round of solicitations. As I mentioned before, the final award guidelines will be presented to the Ocean Protection Council for approval at the October 25th meeting. And then pending council approval of the guidelines, the request for proposals will be released on November 1st. Applicants must submit a letter of intent before they're invited to submit a full proposal. And the letter of intent is really supposed to be an outline of the proposed project. It should be no more than 2 pages of text, and it can contain 1 table for the budget and 1 table for the timeline. And if any permits are required, you'll have to provide proof of permits as well. The letter of intent is designed because this is our first year releasing this competitive awards program. So this letter of intent is really designed to help the applicants to see if their projects are even eligible, if they would be included within the geographic region of the facility, or, you know, part of the program priorities. So we're hoping that this letter of intent will be helpful so that applicants won't have to go through a full proposal just to find out that they aren't eligible to receive the funds. So OPC staff will review these letters of intent to check that they meet these eligibility requirements, and within 30 days of the submission deadline, the applicants will hear from OPC staff whether or not they are invited to submit a full proposal. It's possible that applicants may be asked to amend part of their proposal in order to submit a full proposal as well. So then applicants will be invited to submit the full proposal with a detailed scope of work, a schedule, a budget, etc., and that will be due on February 1st, 2019. Select proposals will be brought to the Ocean Protection Council for approval at the May 15th meeting in 2019, and then approved projects will finalize their work plans and financial paperwork in the summer of 2019, and work can begin once that's completed. Next slide. So that was really a brief overview. I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and comments now. I'd like to open it up to you, and thank you all for your attention. You can submit your public comments to my email, which is listed there. Please submit them by 5 p.m. on September 14th. And just want to say thank you to the Ocean Science Trust for, facilitating the questions now, and I'm happy to turn it over to them.
Wonderful, Tova. Thank you so much. So yes, attendees, if you have any questions, please go ahead and chat them into the chat box now, or you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and try to unmute you so you can ask your questions. And we'll give folks a good full minute or so to go ahead and type something in, because sometimes that just takes a minute. Maybe we should have prepared the Jeopardy music for this interim time. Dun, dun, dun.
I was going to say, isn't that part of your job, is to sing?
I know, right? Yeah, I got to hold on, I'll have to warm up.
Oh, yes.
And of course, too, if there are no questions from the participants, as Tova said, she has her contact information on the screen now.
Yeah, and I'm sure that as people, as you all read the award guidelines that are posted, there will be questions as things come up. So feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Also, please check back on the program's website, which is listed there, as we will be, updating frequently with a frequently asked questions document as I receive questions throughout the public comment period. So if you have a question, feel free to check the website, and if you'd like to get in touch with me directly, I am happy to chat with you.
Great. Well, I guess we'll give it another maybe 10 seconds or so. Also, if you know of any friends or colleagues that might be interested in this information, like we said, we will have this webinar will be archived on the OPC's website, and we'll also have a second webinar with the same information coming up again on Thursday, August 30th from 10 to 11 a.m. Well, if there are no questions, Tova, if it's all right, we might just go ahead and say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Quickest webinar ever. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, Tova.
All right. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.